I want to go to my guess. I hear my guess. The man himself, Kit Klarenberg. How you doing, Kit? You doing okay this morning?
Yeah, very well, thanks, Jamal. Yourself?
I'm doing all right. Well, this afternoon for you. You're not in the States. And no. For the audience, Kit Klarenberg, he's an investigative journalist documenting the role of intelligence services in shaping politics perception. You can find Kit's work at Global Delinquents, the Gray Zone UK, and a couple of weeks ago, you even had one in the Gray Zone proper. Thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure.
You wrote an article that I have been hearing stuff bubble up, even going to Joe Rogan pointing stuff out about the anomalies associated with the Kit Klarenberg murder. Not Kit Klarenberg, Jesus Christ. The Charlie Kirk murder.
Do you know something I don't?
No. No, right? You know it's wild, right? You're going to get a bunch of like conspiracy. If anything happens, they're going to be like, Jamal knew. How did Jamal know?
Yeah. Foreknowledge. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, foreknowledge. He just knew. No, the Charlie Kirk's murder and all of the mysteries surrounding that murder and the weirdness associated with it. I mean, we already knew about, I got to be honest, what I find to be a forged confession document of text messages that they were using. That part was already known. But there were other anomalies associated with the shooting itself, anomalies with the movements of the person, the activities of the people immediately after the killing, all of this stuff. And just so the audience can see for themselves, this is your article on this. And some of the other videos that have came out also look a little strange. Like the idea that his body is so superhuman that it is stopping a sniper rifle that could cut through a moose. And they're like, yeah, but his bone density. He's like Superman. And it's like, okay.
Well, I mean, it's that's the thing is that's not even the stupidest part like of the story. I mean, it's really quite extraordinary. And I must say as well, I think that it's very disappointing to see an almost total lack of interest in the ever multiplying anomalies and oddities and grave questions surrounding this. Like it is primarily people on the right who are bringing this up, with the notable exception of my friend Ricky Hale, accounts for the state media, who's done some really fantastic forensic digging on these issues. It's not really of any kind of concern to people on the left, and it really should be, because we are seeing Charlie Kirk's murder, or was it, being exploited for political gain by the Republicans to justify completely draconian crackdowns on dissent. There's been talk of banning Antifa. I'm not sure how you would go about doing that, given this rather sprawling, leaderless entity, which has kind of varying chapters of varying size and influence throughout the country. I'm not sure, how you would ban them, but also calls for laws to revoke the citizenship and passports of people who are critical of Israel, and all sorts of other just completely insane measures. And Charlie Kirk is being exploited explicitly for these purposes. Now, I might add as well that I myself was motivated to write this because there is just nothing about this incident, let alone the official narrative or narratives, there are several now, make any logical sense whatsoever. It's to an extent that's really quite extraordinary. For instance, in the immediate aftermath of Charlie Kirk's execution, the FBI was very quick to claim that they had an open and shut case against this individual called Tyler Robinson. He's a 22-year-old college dropout, allegedly terminally online, although he doesn't have very much of a visible online footprint, it must be said. I mean, whether that's as a result of a cleanup operation having been conducted by social media platforms, or it's just a lie that he was, was a Zoomer, it isn't particularly clear. He was allegedly radicalized in, like left-wing politics. How terrifying. and seized the opportunity of Charlie Kirk's appearance at Utah Valley University to assassinate him. Now, the scenario posited by authorities as to how Robinson allegedly killed Kirk makes absolutely zero sense whatsoever. So they would have us believe, or would have had us believe, that Robinson, the day before Kirk's appearance at UVU, drove to some woods near the university, dropped the gun off in advance in a cardboard box, drives back home. The next day, he drives to UVU, goes to the woods on foot to collect the rifle, carrying it in a rucksack, which doesn't look like it was big enough to carry the gun in the first place. He then enters the building, the campus building from where Kirk is allegedly shot, wearing one set of clothes. He then changes clothes before setting up a sniper's nest, assembling the gun, calibrating its sights, taking the shot that killed Kirk, allegedly. He then jumps off the roof, changes back into the clothes he was wearing when he entered the building, goes back into the woods to drop off the gun in a cardboard box, wrapped in a towel, and then dawdles around the UVU campus for hours afterwards. I mean, this is despite having the ability to immediately flee the scene in a car. Right. I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now, you mentioned the text messages, which have been offered as evidence of his guilt. They have been subject to much skepticism and outright mockery online, because there are no timestamps, which is pretty standard when text messages or emails are cited in indictments and charging documents, but also they contain all sorts of passages that just seem very bizarre for a assassin keen to cover their tracks, and B, a 22-year-old left-winger to say. So he starts off by telling his roommate and lover, this is Robinson now, I had hoped to keep the secret till I died of old age, before offering all of this hyper-incriminating extraneous detail about clothing changes and where he planted the gun and how he was worried the police would find it, and references to serial numbers and fingerprints and blah, blah, blah. And then he also, Robinson, allegedly deploys phrases like drop point and squad car. Do you know any 22-year-olds who use such phraseology? I've seen some people suggest that this was written by AI. I myself, remain. I don't rule out the possibility that a drunken Kash Patel just cooked this up, late at night, just because reasons, or something equally ludicrous. Now, what's interesting is that since this initial kind of wave of kind of concrete identification of Tyler Robinson as the lone nut shooter in the vein of Lee Harvey Oswald, and there are other parallels and echoes of JFK's assassination in Charlie Kirk's, which we'll get into. Kash Patel has since then, during Charlie Kirk's very bizarre memorial service, which was obviously very public, had this huge crowd, and his wife gave this quite strange speech during which she was giggling at points, and her body language seemed very odd. Kash Patel, while this was happening, issued a statement saying, we're investigating theories, including the location from where the shot was taken, whether there was more than one shooter or Robinson had accomplices. We are investigating whether the text message confession is actually legit. So already authorities seem to be rowing back on the official narrative of what happened. Now, that in itself is a very bizarre turnaround within just, it's 2.5 weeks or just over since this happened, and we've had so much discrepant information. in the intervening time, a wide variety of deeply suspicious video footage has emerged from the event. Now, I reference this in my piece, and it's by no means the only deeply suspicious footage to emerge. Is there's a smartphone video that's shot in the immediate aftermath of Kirk shooting, and it shows that the central campus area where he was talking is basically empty, that the crowd had fully dispersed. There's zero visible police presence whatsoever, or any indication that law enforcement or TPUSA security were trying to isolate the scene to prevent evidence being contaminated or degraded or tampered with. The reverse, in fact. In this clip, an individual wearing sunglasses can be seen standing Kirk's upended, blood-spattered chair upright, then using it as a makeshift stepladder or stool to remove a camera that was situated behind where Kirk was sitting. He then steps away, removes the camera memory card, hands it to someone else who stuffs it in their cap and walks off. He then removes the memory card from the camera directly facing Kirk, which is, this is very unambiguous evidence of evidence tampering, which is a very serious crime. There's no indication that this individual is wanted for questioning, let alone is a suspect in any criminal investigation. Why it was considered a priority for TPUSA to seize and spirit away this potentially vital evidence isn't remotely clear. Now, one interpretation or one solution to this riddle could be that these cameras might have revealed the direction from which Kirk was actually shot, because Tyler Robinson was allegedly on a roof facing where Kirk was sat. Now, the footage of Robinson running away has been broadcast widely in the mainstream media. It was shot by a camera trained directly on the roof from where Kirk was allegedly shot. But, the far more incriminating images of Robinson, setting up his sniper's nest and shooting Kirk haven't been released. Which is, to say the least, very odd. But, even more suspiciously, the horrible footage of Kirk's neck, a hole appearing in his neck and then blood spurting from it. It looks much more like an exit wound rather than an entry wound, which would strongly suggest that he was actually shot from behind. But if he was shot from the front and that gory spurt was an entry wound, there should have been this massive eruption of blood and shrapnel and bone behind him from an even bigger exit wound. And you mentioned that the type of ammunition he was allegedly shot with, it was like .30-06. This is used for killing elks and moose. I've seen videos of people shooting watermelons with it, and they basically just evaporate. Kind of blink and you'll miss it because such is there. But as you mentioned, there was a TPUSA spokesperson called Andrew Colvert who attempted to offer an explanation for this kind of glaring evidentiary issue, and he claims that a surgeon who tended to Kirk told him the bullet absolutely should have gone through, but in a medically unprecedented miracle, Kirk's body stopped it, and the bullet was found just beneath his skin. And yes, Colbert said this was because Charlie Kirk's bone density was so healthy and impressive that he's like the man of steel. I've just seen a flying pig. But there's another point to be made here as well, which is there is something that perked my suspicions and got my antenna twitching in the immediate aftermath of Kirk getting shot. Is the fact that this generated blanket media coverage, not just in the US, but the world over. I have comrades throughout Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, other parts of the world, who in many cases themselves had never heard of Charlie Kirk before his assassination, who've told me that their national media is drowning in stories about Charlie and his killing, which they thought was very odd for, you know, someone who was a minor, if not non-existent figure in their kind of, you know, local milieu, as it were, politically or otherwise. But the point is despite all of this blanket coverage and, you know, the European Parliament standing in silence for a minute in honor of the great Charlie Kirk, I mean, maybe they'll be chiseling his face into Mount Rushmore next, there is so many basic details are unforthcoming. There's been no official announcement from the hospital where he was taken to about his cause of death, when he died. We don't even know which hospital he was allegedly taken to. He was bundled into an SUV by his supporters and driven away. There's been no formal funeral for him, as far as I'm aware, unless his seemingly publicity-hungry wife and supporters had a very small, low-key secret ceremony somewhere without telling anyone, which seems quite unlikely. We haven't had a ballistics report. We haven't had an autopsy report. So many basic details that you would expect to emerge in the immediate aftermath of someone getting killed like this, they're unforthcoming, which is very, very odd.
Correct me if I'm wrong. There was no autopsy in this, even though it was a murder.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, allegedly there was a coroner told Culvert about this medical miracle, which implies that his body was looked at. But yeah, it's just very, very weird. This is very weird. I might add that during Erica Kirk's address, she said she specifically, while giggling, talked about how she had seen Charlie's body at a Utah hospital, not revealing which hospital it was. So it's like, yeah, there's all, I've seen some people even question whether he got killed. I mean, it very much looks like he got shot in a manner which would, kill anyone irrespective of their bone density. But it's like, you can kind of understand where that suspicion comes from, because all of these basic details which accompany the death of anyone, let alone a kind of high-profile figure in the US like Charlie Kirk, they're just absent from any consideration whatsoever. Which is very strange. Now, there's another video anomaly which I didn't go into in my piece, but I do think it's worth mentioning, is that there is a clip of the reaction of members of TPUSA who were seated near the tent where Kirk was speaking. Instantly after Kirk gets shot, they rush to the table he was sitting at. Now, there is some suggestion that they were trying to seize particular items, and there were handovers or people pocketing things. The video looks too grainy for me to make any, and imprecise for me to make any, concrete conclusion about what they were or weren't doing. But leaving aside any consideration of that, in a shooting scenario like this, in the open air, I struggle to see how your instant reflexive reaction is to run to where he was shot, because you wouldn't know what direction he was shot from or whether there was more fire coming, which does tend to suggest that they knew there wasn't going to be any further shots and that they were safe. It's like they're not ducking and covering. They're not trying to get other people to safety. They're rushing directly to where someone's just been killed within a split second of it happening. And it seems like a very, very, very strange thing indeed for anyone, let alone people, who worked with and for Charlie, including his security detail, to do. Now, there's another. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm sorry to interrupt you. They could have been rendering aid. Like, for example, let's say if I had a family member, the family member gets shot. My first response is not going to duck and cover. My first response is going to run to see if the person is okay and to try to render aid, right?
Yeah, but that's not what they do. Like, you know, they literally run to the table and seemingly, you know, stand there, not tending to Charlie, but swiping things from the scene. So it's like, you know, I totally get what you're saying, but it's like, you know, there's no attempt to protect themselves. There's no attempt to protect anyone else, and they don't even seem particularly concerned about Charlie's welfare, which is very strange. And I might add that the mainstream media has even commented on the shocking rank security failures on the day. So Charlie Kirk's events typically were very heavily policed. So to give you an example, in his penultimate rally in California, is this place I'd not heard of before, I must admit, called Visalia. It was held indoors, and there were 60 officers deployed for a crowd of 2,000 people. There were very clear restrictions in place on what attendees could have in their possession. Like people couldn't bring signs in. And there were bag checks. You know, there was a very clear and heavy police presence in the crowd to make sure nothing went wrong. In the days leading up to the event, local law enforcement conducted wide-ranging reconnaissance, scouting out spots of interest to potential shooters, identifying local residents who might have ill will towards Charlie, to monitor them in advance. And on the day itself, you had a large police presence, including drones, outside the venue, monitoring his arrival and departure. Whereas by contrast, this open air event, which in an Associated Press report, there are US Secret Service veterans who expressed kind of complete shock and disbelief that this would be held in such an open environment. The attendees have testified that there were no entry gates for the event. Their tickets weren't checked. Their bags weren't searched. There was no indication that they could see that nearby rooftops or buildings were being monitored or were locked down. In the event of suspicious activity. UVU claims that the event being held outdoors was specifically requested by TPUSA representatives. Even then, they deployed just 6 campus police officers to oversee an event which attracted around 3,000 people. Wow. You know, there's more security at a rock concert. You know, like it's just completely wild to me, and it's like that. Very interestingly, for many years, TPUSA's protection detail was run by the Schaffer group. This was founded by Greg Schaffer, who's this US military veteran. A lot of its staff have backgrounds in intelligence, including Israeli intelligence. Greg Schaffer himself is tied to JINSA, the Jewish Institute for National Security in America, which is the driving force behind the Israeli occupation forces training US police forces. It advocates for greater integration between the US and Israeli military intelligence and security apparatuses. It's even advocated for the US setting up a dedicated military base in Israel itself, which is, very controversial and would not be received very well in many quarters. And it's like he commented and said, well, it's shocking that there was no consideration given to the threat of sniper fire, given the 2017 Las Vegas massacre, which, serious questions hang over what happened there too. But he kind of suggested that, well, maybe Kirk's security people were focused on threats coming from a much closer distance. And Schaffer said that the main threat had always been, when he was running Turning Point USA security, was somebody getting in the inner circle and attacking Charlie, quote unquote. And I wonder if those remarks are more illuminating than he intended, because somebody certainly could have infiltrated Charlie's inner circle and explicitly cleared the path for him to be shot.
Interesting. It's weird. You also point something else out. It is very bizarre for somebody to get shot, and the response of the team is, let's put a chair up in the middle of blood, let's pull all of the cameras, and let's, skedaddle or whatever. That's very strange. You would think that you would just let the police process the crime scene. They would go to the crime scene, they would take the video footage, they would look at the video footage. Now, chain of custody is very weird in all of this, now that they've effectively taken videos. Like, what? I don't know. It's a very odd thing where they felt in that moment, we need to get the video footage now. What the hell is that? I mean, that's very bizarre to me. And as you point out, this has been used as a political cudgel, as a political weapon. And, it's like when you have J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson at a funeral or a memorial service, I guess if they want to call it that, it is obviously being used as a political weapon. Even the whole Antifa stuff, it is being used as a political weapon. So it's almost like in the very beginning, they started figuring out how can we manipulate this and take advantage of this particular situation to our end. Oh, right. There's a transgender person that Tyler is associated with. Let's call him the lover. Let's put out text messages that seem to be very dodgy, that the public don't necessarily agree with. Like, all of this has been very strange. We'll see how this shakes out in court. Has Tyler given any comments on this himself?
Well, no. So, I mean, this is another interesting aspect as well, which is that effectively Tyler voluntarily turned himself into the police because the images that were circulating of someone wanted in connection with the shooting resembled him, or at least they were wearing clothes that he was known to wear, but he has denied any involvement, and he said that he turned himself in voluntarily because he didn't. Excuse me, I've got to stop smoking. Yeah, no, sorry. They're so cheap in the Balkans, I can't help it. But the point is that that he said that he was worried about a SWAT team raid on his home, which might have killed him or his family. He has appeared in court, I think, one time via video link. Didn't really say anything apart from confirm his name. But again, it's like he's been rather forgotten after this initial burst of like mainstream profiles of who was Tyler Robinson and why did he shoot Charlie Kirk. He's kind of disappeared from the picture somewhat, and I think that there are obvious questions. I mean, which even the FBI seems to be acknowledging by saying that there could have been other shooters or accomplices. That he may have been a patsy of some kind, because here, as I mentioned, his behaviour is certainly not what you would expect an assassin to do. I might add I might add as well that those texts, which seemingly highly incriminate him, they just seem a bit too pat, a bit too obvious. It's like, all right, so I wanted to take the secret to the grave, but now I'm going to tell you about everything in minute detail that I did, including where I changed clothes and where I left the rifle and how I'm worried the police will find it and blah blah. And it's just like, I made this joke on Twitter and I will repeat it. It's like a really, really bad JFK assassination tribute act. I mean, yes, we've got a magic bullet. There was allegedly a confession note that Tyler Robinson wrote, which has not been produced publicly. Kash Patel, in this very bizarre interview, I believe it was to Fox, said the note got destroyed. He didn't specify by whom or how, but he claimed that unspecified forensic evidence proves the note did exist and that it openly stated, I decided to kill Charlie Kirk, despite the fact that Tyler Robinson allegedly also wanted to keep it secret until he died. It's just ludicrous. And I think another point that I get into in my article, and it's certainly worthy of further investigation, is we at the Grey Zone, we have in the weeks following Charlie's assassination, we have spoken to a wide variety of his close associates, many of whom are absolutely terrified it must be stressed, and quite understandably either didn't want to talk to us at all, or would only talk to us under the strictest anonymity, and so what very quickly emerged from speaking to them was that in the last kind of weeks of his life, Charlie was extremely worried about having pissed off the Israeli lobby. Now,
Yes.
It must be stressed that Charlie was an ardent Zionist for most of his time in the public eye. And a unapologetic one, but in over the summer, this past summer, he seemed to change course slightly. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that he was possessed of any sympathy whatsoever for the Palestinians or Muslims more generally, but he did publicly express concern over the level of Tel Aviv's influence over US politicians. He openly and also apparently privately to Donald Trump's face said that he was extremely worried about the threat of Benjamin Netanyahu dragging the US into war with Iran. In July, there was a Turning Point USA conference which featured speakers like the anti-Zionist Jewish comic Dave Smith, who gave a speech about a very critical speech about the Gaza genocide. The somewhat unhinged Megyn Kelly talking about whether Epstein was related to Mossad. Some of the sources that we spoke to, they told the Grey Zone that that after this summit, numerous wealthy allies of Netanyahu in the US started to bombard Charlie with threatening phone calls and text messages demanding that he correct course, as it were, and stop his very mild criticisms of stop issuing mild criticism of Israel and never again platform anti-Zionist voices. Charlie publicly talked about how he was under intense pressure and that he wasn't happy about it in an August 6th interview. Weeks before his assassination, hardline Zionist billionaire Robert Shillman, who was like one of the initial funders of Turning Point USA, ended his financing of the organization. And I might add as well, in a very interesting chain of events, we reported on a hitherto unknown influencer retreat in the Hamptons that was organised by billionaire Bill Ackman, who is yet another hardcore Zionist money man. Now, the initial and we noted in this report that the event was ostensibly about the threat of Mamdani becoming New York mayor and therefore precipitating the collapse of Western civilization. But allegedly, it descended into a series of personal attacks on Charlie Kirk specifically for his criticism of Israel. Ackman led the charge with this kind of dossier of offences he committed against Tel Aviv, and this deranged woman called Natasha Horsdorf, who's the public face of UK Lawyers for Israel, which is this deranged Zionist lobby group, which is currently under investigation by the UK Charity Commission and Solicitors Regulation Authority, because they pretend to be a charity and pretend to be a legal body when they're neither, and engage in activities which are, dubious to say the least. And they try and neutralize displays of Palestinian solidarity in workplaces and schools and hospitals and, every sphere of public and private life. Anyway, initially, the response from a lot of people was, well, this report is based entirely on anonymous sourcing. It's total bullshit. I might add that the Grey Zone almost never, ever bases its reporting on anonymous human sources, and the mainstream media does this all the time, like daily. So clearly we're held to a higher standard than the Washington Post is. But I digress. The point is that actually, after this flurry of allegations of disinformation and fake news, a large number of influencers who had attended this Hamptons retreat confirmed it did happen, but they said, well, they kind of issued this denial, stating, well, if Charlie was barraged over Israel, we didn't see it. which is not particularly convincing. And there was one influencer who specifically claimed, oh, well, I was evasive when Max Blumenthal spoke to me on the phone because I was wine drunk boarding a boat in Italy.
But why would they even admit that, right?
Like, yeah.
Yes,
just this pointless detail. Pointless detail. But yeah.
Well, I guess my thing is, would they really admit to it? Meaning, if Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens are like, look, we talked to Kirk. He seemed to be wavering in this particular position. He felt some kind of way about it. He felt like he couldn't maneuver in it. Then there was the interview with Megyn Kelly where he looked like a hostage in that video. Like he forced up, looked like a hostage. Ackman comes out to contest Candace Owens. Can't really push back on anything. He confirms that the meeting took place, but his thing is, yeah, but he wasn't being pressured. And it's like, okay, am I going to really believe a genocide denier that they wouldn't lie about pressuring Kirk to stay on a particular course? No, I'm not going to believe that at all. Why are all of you there? Why is he being offered hundreds of millions of dollars if indeed he's already on board for whatever is taking place? No, it just seemed very dodgy to me. So I agree with you on this.
Yeah, and I might add as well that we've also been told that he was privately contacted by Netanyahu and who offered to turn on Israeli lobby funding spigots for TPUSA and offered him an all expenses paid trip to Israel, which is a very common means by which Tel Aviv gets its hooks into people, and Kirk refused and was subsequently extremely worried that there would be consequences for daring to turn down Netanyahu. And it's like, well, I think that there's a key point here as well, which is that, look, if you look at polls in the US, overwhelmingly, the US population, it condemns very strongly what Israel is doing in Gaza because it is undeniably a 21st century Holocaust that's being televised 24/7. We're not even seeing the full extent of it, and what we are seeing is just horrific. But the point is that younger MAGA voters, again, probably not possessed of very much sympathy for Muslims, let alone Palestinians in particular, likewise are condemnatory of Israeli actions and US support for it, right?
Yes.
So you have an individual who is very influential with younger generations of Americans who are conservatives, who are, or lean rightwards, support Trump, and he's daring to break the narrative matrix on this issue to these highly influential audiences, and it's like these highly impressionable audiences from a position of some influence. That's exactly the kind of thing that the Israeli lobby is going to want to come down on like a ton of bricks. I myself am on the Anti-Defamation League's Jew hate database. For writing about Palestine, little old me. I'm not Charlie. I'm not Charlie Kirk by any stretch of the imagination. I don't have a net worth in the tens of millions. I don't have a YouTube show that regularly gets hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of views. I'm nobody compared to him, and I'm considered a threat. How much more of a threat would Charlie have been perceived? And I think that if we do take the view, and I'm not suggesting that we have concrete proof of this, let alone smoking gun evidence, that there was an Israeli interest in taking him out. Well, it serves a lot of purposes. It silences him permanently. It terrifies other people into silence. And as I mentioned, the people that we've spoken to in Charlie Kirk's circle are very scared. About saying anything, and there are some people who just refuse to speak to us apart from to confirm aspects of our reporting, and they did so, using layer upon layer of anonymizing methods to do so. It's also it has granted the Israeli lobby to posthumously portray Kirk as Israel's best friend and repudiate any suggestion that he was shifting away from that position. And to make matters even more suspicious, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is without compunction or overseeing the genocide in Gaza and openly talking about doing the same in the West Bank when they're done. He has felt it necessary to issue multiple statements denying our reporting and suggesting it's because we get funding from Qatar. And it's like, I've even seen hardcore Zionists online say that he seems to be protesting too much and he just needs to leave this alone. And it's why would you feel particularly compelled to issue denials? Like there was a former head of Mossad who appeared on primetime US TV to rebut suggestions Israel had anything to do with this, and he said, Mossad doesn't assassinate people. This is an agency the agency's motto is rise and kill first. It is notorious for carrying out often, kind of daring assassinations using like poisoned toothpaste, the exploding pages in Lebanon. Netanyahu himself, when he was addressing US lawmakers at that 50 states, one Israel event, which was just like something out of 1984 or something, he was like, don't forget that everyone who has a smartphone in their pocket is carrying a bit of Israel with them. It's not exactly subtle, is it? No. So it's like, I'm staying on this, and I think that there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and I would like it would be great if more people were looking into this, because as I say, the implications for the left, but not only, anyone remotely critical of Israel are absolutely massive. We've just had a national security memorandum specifically citing Charlie Kirk shooting as a reason for cracking down on subversive elements in the US. Who's going to suffer from that, I wonder?
Yes. And in fact, I think I even have a document where I can put this document up.
Yeah.
One of the other things that is super interesting about this, you pointed out, that I didn't quite understand this one, the CCTV footage.
Yeah.
That it was directly pointed to the building. It was directly looking at the sniper's nest. And so what? But it doesn't have him. Where did he arrange the gun? Because apparently he had a screwdriver that he used to effectively set the gun up, lay in wait, take the shot, and then use this thing to unravel the gun. Did he do all of this at the sniper's nest, or did he do this at different locations and then brought the full gun up to the sniper's nest? And I think your point is, why does nobody see him toting the gun up or putting the gun together in the sniper's nest, but you have a CCTV footage that's directly related or looking directly at him at his sniper's point? Or did I get that wrong? Did I misunderstand?
Well, no. That's exactly the thing. Is that the camera that shot the footage of this individual who's allegedly Tyler Robinson fleeing and jumping from the roof. It's quite some fall as well, and they're lugging this very heavy rifle with them. The roof is where Tyler Robinson set up, assembled the gun using a screwdriver. I've seen a lot of people, kind of seasoned veteran shooters, including military veterans, say that you couldn't use a screwdriver to even do it. I myself am certainly not a seasoned shooter, so I couldn't testify to the veracity of that. But that like it's allegedly here he sets up, it's here he takes the shot, and it would have been in the vicinity of where the camera was recording. And then these images haven't been released. And it's like, those, him shooting, let alone assembling the gun, would be, my priority to release to the public rather than footage of some unknown person like jumping off the roof. But that's all we've been given. It's very, but this is the point, is, as I say, the notion that he was shot from that roof is fundamental to the in turn the narrative that he was shot from the front, which I think is bunkum. Really, like I think it's very clear that he was not shot with the ammunition it's claimed he was, and that the shot came from behind somewhere. I think that's like it's pretty clear that the wound in his neck was not an exit wound. But again, that's something that authorities don't want to look into, it seems. And there are no prizes for guessing why.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because they started this in this overt political way. A left-winger has murdered Charlie Kirk. It is probably a transgender person. And then it's like, he has a transgender girlfriend. Like, meaning all of this stuff started as overtly political. And I was looking up the document that you were mentioning before, right here, the White House assessment.
Yeah.
Countering domestic terrorism. And they are using Charlie Kirk as a pretext for this. Meaning they've constructed a political organization that doesn't exist. And they're using Charlie Kirk's death as saying, hey, the left wing is on a tear. By the authority vested in the president, by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, I hereby direct the following. And it says heinous assassinations and other acts of political violence in the United States have dramatically increased in recent years. Even in the aftermath of the horrifying assassination of Charlie Kirk, some individuals who adhered to the alleged shooter's ideology embraced and cheered the evil murder while actively encouraging more political violence. So, like within the first paragraph, Charlie Kirk is invoked. And of course, that's when they're getting into, we're going after Antifa, we're going after these organizations, the president and his authority is effectively allowing this to take place. Yeah, agreed. But what do you think this goes? Meaning, aside from the death, aside from Charlie Kirk getting murdered and however he was murdered, what do you think they're trying to take this? I mean, if I look at the UK and Europe, they're going all the way to the point of a digital ID at this point, which is just mind-blowing, right? Like the surveillance state that they're trying to implement. Where do you think the US is trying to take this, or the right wing is taking this? And just to piggyback on this, there's military in American cities on a fake premise or fake pretext. Donald Trump has used this, and the right wing has leaned into this like heavily. Like it's the left that is committing all political violence, despite the fact that more murders are committed by basically a white guy with a gun. That's on the right. I mean, the shooting that just took place in, what was it, Michigan, I believe? Like where the guy was like a Marine who ends up killing all of those people at Church of Latter-day Saints. Not Michigan. It wasn't Michigan. It wasn't Texas. I need to find the location, but my point remains. What do you think they're trying to take this?
Well, I mean, like I say, I think that we're living in an age of brazen tyranny where power can just, Western power structures can know that they can basically just get away with anything, and we see this with the overturning of election results in numerous countries, the banning of political parties if they don't toe the right line, the prosecution of candidates for daring to run on alternative platforms. I just think that we've reached a point where power knows its position is fragile. The social contract has broken down. People everywhere are struggling. They're struggling to survive. And there is an enormous amount of dissent against governments, particularly over issues like Gaza. There's growing discontent about the war in Ukraine, and they are governed by administrations and people who do not do anything that furthers or their interests whatsoever, or reflects their wishes. And their only response of power structures in that kind of situation is brutal crackdowns. And yes, you mentioned, like the UK seems to out of nowhere be pushing full steam ahead with digital ID. which is completely insane. The EU is instituting new rules as of, I think it's in a few weeks in October. They're going to start fingerprinting, DNA swabbing, using taking biometric data of any non-EU individual entering the block, and then retaining this data for indeterminate periods of time. This is their only response, is just further crackdowns. Now, I mean, I know many Palestine solidarity activists in the UK who have been arrested, are facing jail, are willing to do things that might put them in jail because they reason, well, they can't put us all in jail. Well, having the army on the streets and having digital IDs that, you can be prosecuted for not having in your possession if you get stopped and asked for it. That's as good as being in prison. And I think, more generally, I think this is Western power structures desperately trying to maintain their positions when they have zero legitimacy. As bleak as this is, history does show us that it's usually when power structures are on the verge of collapse that they're their most brutal and repressive. So, better things could be around the corner. It's just a pity that we have to live through the interim, and it could get very nasty indeed. And I neglected to mention that there was one thing that really made my antenna twitch was, in a seemingly coordinated way, there were a large number of individuals, right-wing influencers in the US, who immediately upon Charlie Kirk shooting were like, "This is civil war," and actually, I think it's interesting that hasn't particularly taken hold. I mean, yes, the National Guard has been deployed to numerous cities, but people aren't going along with it. They're not stupid. They can see what's being done. They see that there are traps being laid for them, and they're not walking into them. And I think that in a strange way, for all of its many faults, living in a social media age makes tyranny a bit more difficult to get away with, because you have people who can point out discrepancies in official narratives, who can analyze footage independently and publicize, findings that deviate from the official line, and ask very serious questions of power. If this was the 1960s, say, we saw what happened with the Warren Commission, where, it was quite clearly a tissue of lies, but that was the stock line and it was accepted. But because there was, zero serious mechanism for public pushback against it.
Yeah. I mean, but how do you explain the Ukraine war, for example? Like, you overthrow a country, you flood the zone with just nonsense about Russia trying to take over all of Ukraine, all of Europe with 150,000 people. You have people who believe this. You take over social media, you get rid of the media in Europe. So if you're living in Europe, you may not have an alternative point of view. My ex, for example, they didn't have an alternative point of view. There was no RT, there was no Sputnik, there was nothing that would give them this other take. Like, they still are pretty effective at killing any notion of, like, meaning when they need to put the blanket down, they put the blanket down on a lot of this information. I agree with you. You can go to websites, especially if you're already primed for those websites and you're already arranged in a certain point of view. But the majority of the populace, I don't know, man. Maybe you're right, but I'm not sure.
Well, it's interesting that if you actually, despite the total informational blackout and the outright banning and censorship, I gather from people I know in Europe who don't use VPNs, when they log into X, it's like every other post is, "This has been blocked under European laws," because it's about Palestine or Ukraine. But anyway, what's amazing is that public opinion has turned significantly against the war in Ukraine, despite this. despite this total media unit and political unanimity on the proxy war on Palestine. Initially, the media tried to frame Hamas's actions as somehow, we had all the stories about the beheaded babies shoved in ovens and the gang rapes and all this other rubbish. Some people did believe this, and there was, the media desperately tried to frame Israel's response as, a counterattack against Hamas. Nobody believes it anymore. Actual and the ensuing crackdowns. Even normies are seeing that. Well, you've got grandmothers in the UK being arrested for holding a sign saying "I support Palestine action."
Yes.
And it's like people are increasingly waking up to this because it's just it's so brazen now. I mean, we're talking today. Over the weekend, George Galloway, a veteran British politician with a huge following, who does a very popular YouTube show, suffered. He and his wife, entering Gatwick Airport, suffered the same fate I did when I landed in London last in May 2023. Stopped under counter-terrorism legislation, had their digital devices taken, interrogated for hours. This is a someone who spent decades in Parliament. Like, they are off the leash, but at the same time, there's mass pushback against this. And I saw a lot of people who hate George Galloway's guts on a personal and political level condemning this, and it's like and even the mainstream media has been forced to report on his ordeal. So it's like, I do think this stuff does have the capacity to break through. It might take some time, and again, it might be painful for a lot of people getting there. But there is the promise of something better. And I think, to perfect example. I mean, even though I think it's basically meaningless. The recognition of Palestine by the UK and France and other countries. This didn't just happen. Like, they didn't just do this out of the goodness of their hearts, and they didn't. It was due to mass public pressure. Like, people are a lot more powerful individually and collectively than they give themselves credit for.
Yeah. It's a pressure relief valve, but they're doing it for reasons, right? It's like otherwise they wouldn't have done it at all. Kit, man, I have appreciated this conversation.
Always.
One last thing, real quick. Moldova, in this conversation, does Europe know? Do they realize how jacked up the Moldovan election is? I mean, this. I guess this goes to the whole conversation of whether or not propaganda works or whether or not they even care. But all of the extraordinary actions that they took in order to steal that election and basically overthrow the will of the public by hook or by crook. Does Europe know that when this stuff happens? Do they see this when they see Romania, Colin Gogechku, where they're trying to get rid of him? Do they actually see this, and do they think to themselves, "Man, Europe is a dictatorship," or do they think to themselves, "Well, obviously you have to stop the Russians"? I'm curious, and we have about 2 minutes.
Well, I mean, very, very quickly I actually think that they know that the time is running out, which is why they are moving so quickly to try and entrench and further their power, and they are being so openly authoritarian and repressive. But I mean, there was a very interesting BBC article published at the end of last year in the wake of the Romanian coup that overturned Georgescu's victory, and there was a very interesting quote in it from a Romanian former NATO official who said, "We've bought ourselves some time, but there are real problems here, and it could blow up in our faces." And it's like, I think that they do understand this.
They know it.
They understand that they're in real trouble, and their only response is more repression, which creates a self-defeating cycle. Mm-hmm. The more repressive you get, the more people are in your crosshairs, the more people fight back. It's a pity we have to live through that period a bit, but I call it bloody-minded optimism, but I do think that there might be a happy ending in it at some stage. But God willing, inshallah.
Well, I am optimistic for the long term, very pessimistic for the short term. I think these people are
likewise.
Kit, thank you for this, man. A great breakdown, as always.
My pleasure.
Great breakdown. Kit Klarenberg, he is an investigative journalist documenting the role of intelligence service in shaping politics and perceptions. You can find his work at Global Delinquents and the Gray Zone UK. Kit, I will put your article at the bottom of this so people can go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay?
Yeah, you too. Take care of yourself. Nice one, brother.
All right. Kit is awesome. Shout out to him. He has written a great article. In fact, Kit has a few good articles at where is it? Did I put it down? Did I put it down? I did put it down. Yeah, Kit has a few good articles on global delinquents. Actually, no, I didn't. It's right here. And you can check his work out. Also, Gray Zone UK. You can check his work out there also. This is just one, but if you hit the website, you can see some of the latest articles that he came up with. So Kit is fantastic. Shout out to him for joining